I thought I'd go with just a couple of quickies today. That's Dreidel sitting on the cat tree. The one story I wanted to tell you was the last time we went upstate with Dad to deliver ducks. He delivered ducks to I guess it was a grocery or maybe a deli, whatever, in Monticello, New York. We'd take Route 17 up in the truck, and this time my sister Judy and I were along with Dad, sitting in the front seat of the truck. Dad had been promising us all the way up that we were going to go to this wonderful delicatessen for real corned beef and pastrami sandwiches on real seeded rye bread. So we were all excited. We were definitely going to enjoy supper. Dreidel, why don't you pick your head up so we can see you? Dre! That's better. Anyway, we drove all the way up to Monticello, which was a long trip up 17 in the old truck. And when we got there, we got out all excited at the delicatessen after we had delivered the ducks. And we went in the deli and we ordered our hot corned beef and hot pastrami sandwiches. And the waiter said, "Are you aware that it's Passover?" And the next thing we knew, our sandwiches arrived on matzahs. Well, it was a very messy dinner. But in any case, we still enjoyed it. And it was always a lot of fun going with Daddy someplace. The other story I was going to tell you was about the first time I got a Siamese. I had seen my first Siamese when I was about, I think I was 16 or 17 years old. It wasn't until then that a family across the canal got a Siamese cat, and I don't remember who I went with, but went across the creek to see the cat. And of course I was all excited because I had seen the Disney picture by then, and I knew that I was going to love Siamese cats. So off I went, and finally got to see my first Siamese cat. And I just moved the camera over to my little girl that had the stroke. And she's a very happy little girl. She's doing very, very well, thank you. Washing herself, keeping her face clean, her eyes clean, her tushy clean. She does it a lot better than my irritable bowel syndrome cat. And even though her balance isn't great, she still takes very, very good care of herself. She jumps up and down off my bed, and here she is on the chair, washing herself, as you can see, and she's doing a great job. Now, when I got my first Siamese cat, I was in my sophomore year at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. We were not allowed to have animals in the first year because we lived in the dorms, although once several girls and I snuck in a dog that had been injured, and we brought it in to take care of until it healed. And of course everybody knew, but nobody said anything, and we eventually took the dog and got it adopted. Well, here I was at Pratt. I had a one room and like a tiny closet and kitchenette. I don't think you'd really call it a kitchenette because it was just sort of like a little gas hot plate and a sink, and the bathroom was one floor down. But I knew it was time for me to get a Siamese. And so I looked in the papers and I watched the papers, and eventually I went uptown on the subway. On Madison Avenue there was a cat store called Fabulous Felines, and a guy by the name of Milan Greer owned it, and he had written a book about his so-called golden Siamese. Later on in years, we realized that, of course, these were Tonkinese, and I got to see them. His wife was in the store. I looked at all the cats, And I was really very, very unhappy. First of all, coming up on the subway, some guy had exposed himself to me on the subway, and I leaped up and changed cars in a hurry, but that wasn't unusual in Manhattan. When I got to the store, what I really expected to see were some nice cats, healthy, friendly, you know, what you look for when you go to look for a kitten. So I was really disappointed because the kittens were not healthy. They had runny eyes and runny noses, and they were thin, and really, I had the good sense to walk away. So then I went back to the newspaper and started looking again, and I saw an ad for Siamese kittens, out in Queens, which is the first borough on Long Island, besides Brooklyn, which we don't really count. And it was way out in Middle Village. So I picked myself up and took a subway and 2 buses and eventually ended up where I was supposed to be, at this lady's house in Middle Village. And she took me down to her basement, and it was crawling with silverfish. Those horrible bugs that just, they were covering the walls. They weren't cockroaches, thank goodness. But I wasn't thrilled with silverfish either. Anyway, I looked at all the kittens, and they appeared to be healthy, and they were sturdy. And they were not show quality. I wasn't looking for a show quality kitten, Siamese, even if I'd known what one looked like back then, which I didn't. These were little apple-headed bundles that were purring and mewing and playing and doing all the right things. And the lady had said that they had had their first shots, and so I paid $75 for my first Siamese kitten, and 2 buses and a subway later, I was back in my room in Brooklyn. I'm trying to remember the name of the street. It was Myrtle Avenue under the L, which was really strange because that's where my father was born, on Myrtle Avenue under the L. Anyway, I had my first Siamese kitten. I named him Kim King Pei. And I thought that was a pretty good name for a kitten, especially since I could call him Kimi for short, which I loved. And so that's the story of my first acquired Siamese kitten. I hope you'll come back and I'll tell you more about Kimi, and we'll go on to some of my other cats soon or later. Take care now. Please subscribe.